What's up guys, and welcome back to another episode of Pokemon Origins with me, TheOneIntegral. So, today we are looking at the Mudkip evolution line, as is fairly obvious to be honest, by the title and everything else. So Mudkip and its evolutions, and obviously Swampert, Mega Swampert, etc. As always, be sure to suggest some more Pokemon down below in the comment section you want to see in future episodes, future installments of Pokemon Origins, some Hoenn Pokemon maybe, and then we'll be moving on to Sinnoh after that, so you guys can start thinking about those sorts of Pokemon too. But for now, let's take a look at Mudkip. Mudkip is number 258 in the National Pokédex, and its Japanese name is Mizugoru. It is the Mud Fish Pokemon and a pure Water type, obviously being a Water type starter Pokemon for the Hoenn region. Mudkip stands at 0.4 meters or 1 foot 4 inches tall. We'll look more at that later on, and it also weighs 7.6 kilograms or 16.8 pounds, so it's a fairly small, fairly light Pokemon. Looking at the models from Generation 6 here, you can see in its shiny form, Mudkip is sort of a pinky purple colour, along with sort of a yellowy almost underside, and I'm pretty sure its cheeks are the same colour as in its normal form, so not much to say there really. So Mudkip, as I mentioned, it's a starter Pokemon, so it's going to evolve fairly quickly on, and will evolve into Marshtomp starting at level 16, as is the same with most starter Pokemon. So Mudkip, as I mentioned, it's a small Pokemon, and it's also, as you can tell, blue in colour, or primarily blue. Its upper half, sort of, its head, its back, and its arms and legs, or its four legs, I guess, are a sort of a sea bluey colour, is what I can describe it as, sort of a light blue, nice light cherry blue, a deep blue, or a mix between deep and light, basically. And its lower half, which is sort of the lower half of its face, its throat, down to its underside, also its tail as well, which we'll talk about in a second, is a sky blue colour. It's much lighter, it's much paler, I guess, than the rest of its body. As I mentioned, it does have this tail, and its tail is in the shape of a fin. Very fin-like, as you would expect, I guess, from something that's a water type. It's going to have some influences from fish or similar things, as we'll look at later on. But this tail looks a lot like a fin, and it also has this head crest as well, which is, again, very similar to a fin there. And this head crest is fairly small. Actually, to be honest, compared to Mudkip itself, it's pretty big. But it's not huge entirely. It's just a very thin head crest that comes straight up, and that's that. And then obviously the only other sort of main feature for Mudkip are these cheeks it has, which are gills actually. They are star-shaped gills on its cheeks, and they are a nice orange colour as well, giving Mudkip the sort of the pizzazz it needs. Because if it didn't have those cheeks, can you imagine Mudkip without those cheeks? It would look very pale and boring, I guess. So those cheeks definitely complete it, and its eyes are small and black. They don't have any colour to them. They're basically just small black eyes. That's pretty much summing it up there. So Mudkip, being a water type, is going to have some adaptations to help it with water, and as we're told, the fin on its tail, or fin on its end, I guess, its tail fin, helps it swim through the water faster. But this also acts as a radar, which is highly sensitive and can be used to detect movements of water or winds, tidal winds around it. Or not so tidal winds, but just water and air in general, which obviously air includes wind. But it can detect movements of water and air around it, say if water's flowing in behind it or something, so it can actually sense what is happening around it without having to turn its head, so it's a bit psychic, I guess, in some senses of course. But this tail helps it do that, so it's very connected. It's interconnected to water and everything like that. We're also told it breathes using these gills on its cheeks, so obviously that's how it can breathe underwater. It uses these gills to breathe underwater. Unlike most fish, actually, because obviously fish in real life, they've got gills, they use them to breathe underwater, but if you bring a fish out of water, it can't breathe through those gills. So unlike most common fish, Mudkip can breathe through its gills on land as well. We assume, at least. I mean, it has a mouth as well, so it could breathe through there. It's just not specifically mentioned, so we're told it breathes through its gills, so I guess that means all the time, who knows. Finally, we're also told Mudkip can actually lift and crush large boulders. Even though it's a really small Pokemon, it can lift and crush large boulders with its legs, almost, so I guess it lifts the boulders gets on its back and lifts the boulder above it, maybe, I don't know, but apparently it can crush these boulders as well, so Mudkip is definitely a strong little guy. Wouldn't really want to mess with him too much, or wouldn't want to get on the wrong side of him. So, what's Mudkip based off of in terms of design? Well, very similar, as you'll be able to tell by the name. It's based on either a mud puppy or a mud skipper, and both of these are, little animals that basically live in the mud There's not much else to say apart from that. Live in the mud, live in water. You can see the first one, its gills are very similar. The mud puppy has very similar to gills to what Mudkip has. Not exactly the same, obviously, but these gills sort of come off the side of its head. In terms of body shape, neither of them are really close to it, but you get the general idea there. Sort of, 4 short legs, and then sort of a shorter body than a mud puppy or a mud skipper. Mud skipper, what's sort of similar to it with Mudkip? Well, it's very linked to the name, as we'll look at in a minute, but also its gill, or its fin rather, on the mud skipper's back. You can see it's very similar to the fin on Mudkip's back end, its tail sort of thing, or the one on its head. So either of those, it could be very inspirational there. Or the final inspiration thing could be the axolotl for Mudkip. The name isn't as linked, but again, if we look at the axolotl, you can see it has these gills on its cheeks, basically. Very similar to the mud puppy, so it's very linked in there to how its gills, its cheeks work, basically. Apart from that, not much else to talk about for Mudkip's origin, because it is a very simple Pokemon. So if we move on to the naming, as we have mentioned, we'll look at its Japanese and English names. The Japanese name is Mizugoro, which is a combination of Mizu, which means water, and Mutsugoro, which is Japanese for mud skipper. So, water mud skipper, water skipper, something like that. Just basically mud skipper. Basically, it's very similar to mud skipper with water added on. It's generally where it comes from there. The English name Mudkip is a combination of mud and skip, which is obvious, but it could also be a shortened version of mud skipper, which would probably make more sense. But looking at a combination, we have mud, obviously, because mud is straight in there, and skip, maybe take a kip out of that. Not sure if Mudkip skips around too much, but mud skipper definitely, just take out the S and then shorten it up a bit, and you have Mudkip, basically. So one final thing before we move on to look at the first or the second Pokemon, the first evolution for Mudkip, we are going to look at its size. So being 0.4 meters or 1 foot 4 inches tall, it's not that big. I've taken the height measurement from its actual head rather than the top of the crest, because that's how it usually works. If we took it from the crest, it would be absolutely minuscule, so that would not be correct at all. But that looks pretty much exactly how you would size up Mudkip. It's not too big, comes up maybe just below your knee or just above your ankle. Not too big a Pokemon, but apparently it can still crush boulders, so watch out for it, I guess. But that's going to be it for Mudkip. If we move on to its evolution, we are going to look at Marshtomp. So Marshtomp comes right after Mudkip at number 259 in the National Pokedex, and its Japanese name is Numukuro. It is the Mudfish Pokemon as well, and is now a Water Ground type. So it's getting the Ground type on here, being, to do with mud. That would be obvious. So, now stands at 0.7 meters or 2 foot 4 inches and weighs 28 kilograms or 61.7 pounds. If we then take a look at the models from Generation 6, you can see very similar to Mudkip. It's a purpley colour when it's shiny, and its cheeks and its orange colouring has now actually become a very light yellow, which looks a bit weird in my opinion, but if you're going to go for it, why not? It looks okay. But yeah, pinky purple, and then obviously some dark purple highlights on its body as well. As we mentioned just now, Mudkip evolves into Marshtomp starting at level 16, and then Marshtomp will evolve further into Swampert starting at level 36, as is the same much for any starter Pokemon, so really nothing too surprising there. So, Marshtomp is a medium-sized Pokemon, and it's now actually bipedal, whereas Mudkip was obviously on 4 legs. Marshtomp now stands on its 2 legs, and it has a light blue body, very similar to how Mudkip had a blue body as well, except it's a slightly different tone now, a slightly different colour, whereas Mudkip is sort of like a lovely light sort of cheery blue. Marshtomp's almost looks like a bit of a dreary blue, I guess you could say, a bit of a pale blue. I don't know how to describe the colour really, a bit greeny, a bit sort of like, when you've got water in a pool and you've left it for a couple weeks and it's just gone off a bit, it's not that, I don't know. But has a blue body generally, and it has a slightly lighter blue colour on its upper chest and also its neck and its throat. You can see a bit more easier on the models really than the Sugimori art, but you can see it has this sort of, the lighter blue on its lower jaw, I guess it's called, and its throat, and just sort of the top bit of its chest. Not much of it really, just that little bit for some reason, but it's a nice touch. And it has, very similar to how Mudkip had this fin-like tail, Marshtomp now has a fin-like tail, except it actually has 2 fins back there, and they're a dark blue now, whereas Mudkip's carried on sort of the blue colour on its underside, the light blue colour, Marshtomp's just got dark blue fins there, 2 coming off its back there, sort of almost like wings, I guess you could say. They're not exactly wings, but you get the idea. And also this one fin-like head crest as well, that's sort of very similar to Mudkip's, but it's more of a, it comes up the back of its head really, rather than Mudkip's was like sort of just goes straight up. Marshtomp's comes up and curves up, and then it goes down on sort of onto the forehead there, which is quite nice. And carrying on from the gills we had on Mudkip, Marshtomp again has orange gills on its cheeks, except they now have only 1 spike. Not really too sure what that's all about. Okay, 1 spike there, and again now it has also this stomach area is now orange as well. So I don't know really where that's come from. It's just there, but it looks cool. It's a bit of an extra detail. And then orange eyes as well. It's gone from having these black eyes to sort of just orangey as well. So that's another change now. Blue and orange, basically. That's what Marshtomp is. So what can the Pokédex tell us about Marshtomp? Well, it's actually faster travelling through sort of like, you know, deep mud than it is at swimming. I guess because now it's got 2 fins on its back end, it can't really use them very well to swim with, because they're sort of going to be almost conflicting at some points in terms of trying to swim. But it's faster going through mud than swimming. Who knew? Maybe it's just sort of got that sort of body texture that can wade through nice and quickly, or maybe its fins actually help that sort of get a bit more, I don't want to say it gets a bit more streamlined, because that's the opposite of what fins do, you know, when they're sort of out like that, but maybe they help in some way. You can just like flap them about, something like that, I don't know. But apparently it can travel through mud quite fast, so who knows. But as we can tell, its hind legs have grown stronger because it can now stand up on 2 of them rather than being sort of hunched over on 4 like Mudkip was. Nice and strong back sort of hind legs. Its arms have grown out as well, obviously. I didn't really mention this just now, but they have grown out. You can now see 3 fingers on each, and there's a sort of long arms, similar to Combustions, but without the claws. Just sort of long arms, and they're just there, almost like, you'd imagine they would slap you. They wouldn't do much else but slap, I guess. Hence why I can learn Mud Slap, eh? But Marshtomp is also covered in a fin film that allows it to live on land. What is this film? I don't know. Just a thin, sticky film it's described as. And it can actually replenish this film by rolling around in the mud. It can sort of moisturise its body again, get some fluids back into it. So maybe it's something to do with mud, you know, just sort of helps it be able to run around on the land, because obviously its body is going to dry out, but the film sort of, you know, helps it stay there for a bit. It just can't stay out on land for extended periods of time. It has to, you know, go and have a little mud paddle, or, you know, just to swim to you know, to sort of replenish this and allow it to carry on going. But Marshtomp also loves to play in the mud on beaches at low tide. Again, we can assume this is to replenish the film or whatever, but it can, yeah, just likes to play in the mud apparently, you know, just chilling, playing in the mud. And also it burrows in dirt to sleep. Not necessarily mud, but dirt. So maybe mud sometimes, because obviously mud would be nice and wet, so you can sort of, you know, help it keep its skin moisturised, but generally, yeah, burrows in dirt to sleep. That's that there. So Marshtomp likes playing in mud. A lot of stuff to do with mud here really for Marshtomp, more than Mudkip, but yeah, Marshtomp is a muddy Pokemon. So what's Marshtomp based off? Well, on rather very similar to Mudkip, either a Mud Puppy, Mudskipper, or Axolotl, or, you know, a combination of the 3, just because of its general sort of look. Because obviously its arms, as I said, they're used for slapping, so they look almost more like fins than actual arms, because you can't really grab with them too well. So it looks very similar to some sort of aspects of the Mudskipper there. But obviously the gills on the cheeks, like the Mud Puppy or the Axolotl, you get the idea there. Its crest on its head, however, is a bit interesting. It resembles that of a Murmillo helmet in some, you know, in terms of actually having sort of the crest come up the back, or possibly a certain type of Corinthian helmet. Murmillo helmet was worn by gladiators, and a Corinthian helmet was worn, I think, by Romans, possibly. I'm not too up to date on that sort of thing. But they were, you know, worn by stuff like that, you know, in the army. It wasn't the army back then, but, you know, war and stuff, gladiators, you know, just generally. And either one of those crests really works, doesn't it? Because, I mean, the second one, the Corinthians, looks maybe a bit more like it, because of just the fact that it comes up and it curls, and that's actually a horsehair one, whereas the Murmillo one, again, it's very similar, but either one could work really. You know, it's just sort of maybe a mix of them as well. But yeah, that's sort of the inspiration for Marshtomp there. And then the naming for Marshtomp, Japanese name Nunakuro, is a combination of Numa, meaning swamp, and crawfish, which is basically, you have crawfish, which is an alternate spelling for crayfish. So, you know, it's a type of watery animal thing. But yeah, swamp fish, basically, something along those lines. Makes a lot of sense. The English name Marshtomp is a combination of marsh and stomp. Stomp maybe just referring to how it stomps around and plays in the mud, or possibly how Mudkip could crush boulders, so we can assume Marshtomp could do the same sort of thing. And obviously marsh being, you know, marshy, swampy land, stuff like that. Then we also have the French name here, which is Flavio, which is a corruption of flot, which means tide. And this is, I guess, relationship to how we were told in the Pokédex, at low tide likes to play on beaches in the mud, so when the tide's out and there's all marshy area around, Marshtomp or Flavio can go and play, basically, something along those lines there. But before we move on to the final Pokemon for today, if we take a look at the size of Marshtomp, standing at 0.7 meters or 2 foot 4 inches, you can see it comes up just sort of Ash's waistline almost, sort of my mid-leg. So it's not a huge Pokemon, but it's getting bigger, certainly bigger than Mudkip was. But still a fairly small Pokemon. It wouldn't be too much of a worry for you, is it, if that thing was running towards you, because you could just run away from it, because look at those little legs it has. You just run away. So that's it for Marshtomp. If we move on to the final Pokemon for today, we can take a look at Swampert. Number 260 in the National Pokédex coming right after Marshtomp, and its Japanese name is spelt Large, but I cannot for the life of me know how to pronounce the actual name, which is like Raguraji. I don't know. Maybe like Ragraj, something like that would be how I'd have to assume it would be pronounced. I'm not too sure. Again, it's the Mudfish Pokemon and is still a water ground type. It stands at 1.5 meters or 4 foot 11 inches tall and weighs 81.9 kilograms or 180.6 pounds. So it's gotten pretty big now in terms of weight at least, and we'll also look at the size later on. And then checking the models from Generation 6, we can see the shiny form, very similar to how its previous evolutions have. It has purple skin, sort of the light purple across the skin, darker purple on its highlights, and its orangey, orange ridges this time, rather than being yellow like they were on Marshtomp, seem to be either the same colour or just a very slightly lighter orange, but I'd say they were the same colour, to be honest. There's not a huge change, but apart from that, yeah, it's really just the skin turning pinky and purple. That's pretty much it. So, Marshtomp, Swampert. Oh, hopefully I'm not the only one that does it, confuses Marshtomp and Swampert. Swampert is a large Pokemon now, and it is bipedal. However, you'll see it hunched over a lot of the time, on its front feet as well, so mainly bipedal, but I guess a lot of the time it is quadruped as well. It can sort of move around a bit easier, but it can stand up on 2 legs. It has a blue body, very similar to previously, and it sort of is a sort of a sea blue again, very similar to how we had Mudkip in the first place. Sea blue on its on its limbs, on its upper body as well, and on the top of its head, and a lighter blue underside here. Again, very similar to how Mudkip had this sort of a lighter throat and also a lighter stomach, and that area down there. Its fins, very similar to the same colour as Marshtomp. It has now only 1 fin on its back end now, whereas Marshtomp had 2, and this is a bigger fin, obviously, as you can tell. 1 single fin going right up the centre, but it now has 2 on its head. So it's just switch positions. The 1 on its head and 2 on its back goes to 2 on its head and 1 on its back. But there's this single head crest has now gone into 2, coming off of the eyes basically, and then going backwards on the head. Very different to sort of how Marshtomp's was. It was much more similar to how Mudkip's head crest was in the first place now. And very similar to before, it has orange gills on its cheeks, and also these new orange ridges on its limbs. No longer has an orange stomach, but it has these orange ridges sort of on the, I guess, the wrists and lower legs as well. Just sort of bumps basically in orange in colour. And its cheeks, they have 2 main spikes and 1 smaller spike in the middle, I guess. So more similar to how Mudkip's cheeks were than Marshtomp's with a single one. Almost a combination, I guess. Almost a combination. Swampert also has these orange eyes as well, as mentioned, connecting onto these head crests that go on back. But apart from that, there's not really much to say with Swampert. Its arms are very similar to how Marshtomp's were, but I guess the fingers are a bit more spread, as you can see there, so it might be able to use them a bit more easier rather than just be able to slap them about, but generally it's going to be using its arms for most of the work rather than its actual hands. So what does the Pokédex tell us about Swampert? Well, it has powerful vision now, so it can see through murky waters. We can assume maybe it had, a good vision when it was a Mudkip or a Marshtomp as well, but it's now powerful as a Swampert, so it helps it, swim around in these murky, dirty waters, which is where, generally where it's going to be safest and most at home, because of the fact that it can see. So it can do that, and it can also sense differences in the sounds of waves and winds, in particular tidal winds, just to do with more water, and actually uses its fins to do this. We can assume the two on its head maybe help triangulate a bit better, maybe the one on its back sort of acts as a big sort of detector maybe. And we're also told if Swampert senses a storm is on its way, it actually gets big boulders and it piles them up around its nest to protect it from, crashing waves or strong winds or whatever. So actually, this is helpful towards it because it can sense these storms coming and then help out and protect its young, assuming it's looking after some Mudkip or something. And we're also told it's strong enough to drag a large boulder, because obviously it would have to be to pile up and make this nest. But its arms are also rock hard, so whereas Marshtomp's looked a bit sort of like floppy and slappy, Swamperts are now rock hard, and they can smash boulders with them, so very similar to how Mudkip could in the first place. Strong enough to drag them around, smash them up, it can just destroy boulders. Boulders are Swamperts, just whatever it wants to do with them. It can carry them, it can drag them, it can smash them, just don't, if you're a boulder, don't mess with a Swampert, is the TLDR of this video. So what's Swampert based on? I wish I could tell you more really, but it's basically based on Mudpuppy, Mudskip or Axolotl, very similar to Mudkip, and there's not much to say about that. Its head crest doesn't really have any big resemblance. Yeah, there's nothing special really for Swampert. It's just taken the basic design and built on it basically, so really nothing much to say there. But its naming, we have a bit more to say. Its Japanese name, Laglarge, or like Ragraju, I don't know. It's a combination of lagoon and large, lag, large. Or it could also incorporate lag, as in to lag behind, to be slow, because looking at Swampert's body, it's not going to be the fastest Pokemon, so it is going to lag behind anyone else, so that's where it could come from. I mean, looking at lag large anyway, you do think about lag rather than the lagoon in the first place. And the English name Swampert is a combination of, obviously, swamp, and the second part is a bit more of a sort of weird one, but rampart works. Rampart being, when you look at a castle, you have ramparts, sort of the walls, the ridges on castle walls. I believe that's what ramparts are. So that sort of links to how Swampert stacks up boulders to protect its nest, basically. But yeah, that's pretty much that. So before we move on to Swampert's Mega Evolution, if we take a look at how big Swampert is, we can see 1.5 meters or 4 foot 11 inches. Compare that to us here, it looks a bit bigger than 1.5 meters or 4. I mean, Ash is 5'3" and it's just a bit smaller, which is 4 inches between them. So it makes sense there, it does match up there. Assuming that's the height that Swampert usually stands at, it doesn't stand up any higher or taller. You'd assume it wouldn't because of how sort of big and heavy its body is, but it's a pretty big Pokemon now. I would not want to mess with it, for starters, because it can do damage. Its arms are rock hard, you can just swing them and it'd probably just break all your ribs. So Swampert, definitely not a Pokemon to mess with too much, but we still have a Mega Evolution to look at, so we're going to be even more scared by the time we've looked at that. So let's take a look at Mega Swampert. Okay, so it keeps the water ground typing, same thing there, and in terms of height it gets taller now, goes up to 1.9 meters or 6 foot 3 inches, it's massive now, and weighs 102 kilograms or 224.9 pounds, so it's a very big, very heavy Pokemon now, so you definitely don't want to be messing with it really. Fun fact actually, all three of the Hone Starter's final forms, as in the Mega Evolutions, they're all the same height. They're all 1.9 meters or 6 foot 3 inches. Isn't that crazy? Don't know why, but that's that. Looking at the models from Generation 6, you can see Mega Swampert or Shiny Mega Swampert, very similar to how we had Vanilla Swampert. Its colouring is pink and purple, and then obviously it's all its orange highlights stay the same colour still, so there's nothing really much there. But basically, yeah, pink for the body, dark purple for the highlights. To evolve your Swampert into Mega Swampert, you will obviously need a Swampertite. That's just expected. So what happens when Swampert Mega evolves? Well, it grows much larger and much bulkier as well. You can see it's got a very, very big bulky body now. I mean, it had one already, but its body is very bulky now, and also its arms. It's powered up its arms. Its legs, you can't say the same before. Typical joke. Swampert skip, Mega Swampert skip leg day, etc. But basically that's that. It also has a triple head crest now, whereas it just had 2 on its head. It's now got 3. Maybe this enhances its ability to detect, winds and water, or something like that. But it also has more orange ridges across its body. It has what used to have like one on each arm, 1 on each leg. It now has 3 on each sort of wrist, I guess you could say, and then also 2 on its back, it seems, either side of these ridges across its body. In terms of whether it's got any on its legs, doesn't seem to have any on its legs anymore, so it's sort of lost those. They've moved up its body as well. Its gills have also grown larger as well, though. You can see much larger and much longer coming out of its body, you know, 3 sort of long tendrils almost, like, you know, the long back one being the longest, and then the middle, and then the short one at the front. Also seems, no, it's just 3, and then, yeah, they come forward a bit as well. Its eyes have now actually gotten lighter orange as well, whereas they were just orange, you know, same sort of colour as the ridges. Now a nice light orange as well, a nice light and bright orange, which looks cool. I like that as well. So yeah, not much else to say apart from that for Mega Swampert. Not much changes really. It keeps the general sort of shape, it just grows bulkier basically, powers up those arms quite a lot, and its fingers have now, you know, they've bulked up even more. You can see they're now black, you know, dark blue, black sort of colour, rather than sort of, you know, normal sort of the rest of its arm colour. If we take a look at how big Mega Swampert is, you can see, because of how big it's bulked up, and also the fact it's 1.9 meters or 6 foot 3 inches now, it's pretty darn big if you look at it. It's taller than me now, in terms of where its sort of back gets to, but it's massive. It could probably grab Ash in one of its hands. Just don't mess with Mega Swampert, guys. Just don't do it, please. It seems to be the general sort of idea for most Pokemon. Do not mess with them. They are too big and too powerful, and just don't do it. Just do not do it, guys. But that's Mega Swampert, that's Mudkip line. So that's going to be it for today's episode of Pokemon Origins, guys. If you enjoyed it, be sure to hit the like button down below and drop a comment suggesting some more Pokemon for next episode. But for now, I'll be seeing you next time. Thank you for watching. Goodbye, my friends.